Hello, everyone. I thought I would give my thoughts on the writer's strike in Hollywood. Now, I've talked about this in several other videos, but this is going to be the first video where I throw all my thoughts on the table. Now, obviously, as a writer, I side with other writers, and I believe writers deserve to be paid and treated fairly and equally. So, I'm hugely sympathetic towards the writer's strike. However, there is a part of me that is a little unsympathetic given the fact that independent authors, self-published authors like myself, have it far worse because obviously there isn't a union for independent or self-published writers, and therefore Amazon can often take advantage of us, and we have no recourse to respond. And so in that case, Hollywood writers and film writers are doing much better than self-published writers and independent writers. And but however, that doesn't change the fact that I think that all writers, regardless of whether they're in a union or not, deserve to be treated equally and paid equally. And for example, the landscape, the technology landscape over the last few years, last few decades has changed immensely because it used to be that especially when it came to television, that writers could make a living by their shows being syndicated. Um, and because every time the show aired, they would receive money from it, and or residuals and all of that. But obviously, that has changed with streaming services. Now, obviously, the way that writers should be paid with streaming services is that every time someone clicks a video or something or watches a TV show, that they should receive a residual for that, kind of like with Spotify, and that the residual has to be enough that the writer can make ends meet and make a living. So I don't believe that the writers in Hollywood should be compromising on residuals at all. I think that is the thing that they need ultimately to get out of this strike, is that they need higher residuals. And now, however, I try to look at things with a bit of nuance. And so there are some things, and I don't claim to understand. I've read several articles and watched several videos on what the writers are asking for and why the producers are opposing it. And and so I don't claim to know everything about it, but I will say that from what I understand, there are some demands that I think that the writers are making that are not very tenable. Because the thing is with me as a writer is that I'm not loyal to any union, writers union, or any studio. Is that my concern is not being hindered and having the creative process flourish. But historically, both major studios, producers, and in some cases unions have hindered the creative process. Because obviously, with corporations, they hinder the creative process because it's all about what will make the most amount of money and not necessarily what will be the best artistic or creative product. However, unions can do that as well, because sometimes unions will try to get the best deal for their workers, understandably, but in some cases that can come at the expense of the best creative product or the best artistic creative product. For example, some one of the demands that the Writers Guild has is that a certain number of people be of writers be staffed on every project. I don't think that's tenable because obviously uh, not the same amount of writers will be needed for every project, and in some cases you may have a show where the showrunner is the main voice, and other TV shows that are more collaborative. So I don't think that is ultimately tenable. Like if I were a showrunner, for example, and other writers were hired, out of union requirements, even if I didn't need them, I think that would ultimately hinder the creative process. And so, but so there are on both sides of the aisle there are things that are being demanded that are not reasonable. Of course, now you have the thing with AI, which obviously studios replacing writers with AI is insane, and ultimately just can't be done because an AI can't write a competent script. Now, however, I do think that AI may be useful in coming up with outlines in certain cases. It should be used as a tool, so you need kind of a balance there. And so, but the trouble is that whenever you're dealing with a structured business, there's always going to be things on all sides that hinder the creative process and what will make the best product. But but now, and of course, one of the negative sides to this is that reality shows are going to become more popular as a result, just as they did in the 2000s, which I hate reality shows, most of them anyway, and because they kind of appeal to the lowest common denominator. And again, not all reality shows, but quite a few of them. And so yeah, overall, I side with the writers, even though I'm try to be nuanced about it, and there are problems I feel on both sides.